the earlier you define your career path, the better. Now, what I struggle with is, okay, well, how do people figure out who they want to be when they grow up? And by the way, that's not like meant to be targeted just to young people. I know a lot of older folks that still don't know what they want to be, because it's a very tough thing to answer. And that's what, back to that comment, like, just do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life comment. That's just, it's like fingers on a chalkboard to me, because it basically sets the expectation incorrectly that your career should be leisure. You should always love it. I mean, that is such bull crap. Case in point, like, all kids want to be YouTube stars these days, or TikTok stars, or influencers. Because my kids watch this guy they call Unspeakable. That's his YouTube name is Unspeakable. I think his actual name is James or something. I forget. Doesn't matter. The guy just records himself just goofing off with his buddies, and they're just doing crazy things. They're having like Nerf gun wars, and they're riding jet skis in this little pond. They're doing all sorts of crazy things. Looks like they're having a blast. All right, and that's what the kids see. They see all this fun. And they go, oh, I want to do that. That's what I want to be. And this guy's able to buy, Lamborghinis and things like that. But what they don't see is that this guy's probably working till 3 a.m. editing these videos.
Yeah. And
putting that content out there and doing the hard work to publish it. There's elements of his job that he probably thinks are absolute misery. One of the good episodes I listened to was Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is like the most popular YouTube. You got to listen to his interview with Lex Friedman on Lex Friedman's podcast. The guy is a workhorse. He is not. So he is not just leisurely videotaping himself and putting it out there. So my point is that even these guys who have these perceived glorious, amazing jobs, that there's parts of their careers that they probably hate, and it's not all leisure. And for you to think like, well, I'm going to be economically productive by doing things that I absolutely love doing. Okay, well, let's name a few things. Yeah, everybody loves watching Netflix. Everybody loves going to restaurants and eating. Everybody loves travel. Everybody loves going to baseball games. How you gonna make money doing that?
Well, and it's important, there's kind of this intersection of, you have to think about things that you enjoy doing, and then you have to find a way to make it economically viable.
I don't even think you need to enjoy doing it. I don't think that. I think that you learn to enjoy things that you're good at.
So welcome to the Money Alchemist podcast. I am your co-host, Brent Gargano.
Yeah, and I'm host Ben Jones. Thank you for tuning in.
And look, we are here today to talk. I mean, I guess backing up a bit, we've been doing this podcast now for, I don't know, six months, something like that. And I think this is episode
18.
So, as people listening to this, we really hope that you are getting some level of value. Honestly, the way that this has started is Ben and I just wanted to talk about some of the things that we are passionate about and share that with people that, I guess if you're voluntarily listening to this podcast, you must be interested. So we hope that through listening to us, you can make wiser choices, be more thoughtful about your personal finances, and learn something. So as we grow and as we continue to do these episodes, we will continue to shift and just focus and try to, make sure that we are meeting you with what you want. So one of the ideas that we've had is to start incorporating like questions from the listener, so to speak, or things that we've been dealing with in the past couple of weeks, just as a way to get the conversation started and create topical conversations. So anyway, this week we both really, Ben, you and I had a couple of things go on, and maybe I'll give you a chance to talk about you talked to the University of Dayton, was it yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday I went to go talk with a group of guys. And I think it was like 12, maybe 13, 14 guys. And they were all in various stages of their university career. Some were seniors, most were between, I think, juniors and seniors, but they were all trying to figure out who they wanted to be when they grew up. And they had a pretty good idea. They wanted to go into finance, and some were zeroed in on the financial planning career path, which is a very rewarding career path. I think you and I both agree on that. So, they wanted me to come and present. That was their first mistake. Is actually, I've got a pretty colorful, career path in this industry. I kind of fell into it, as the saying goes, bass backwards. So I had no idea what I wanted to do when I got out of college. And I fell into this career because one of my sister's high school friends was doing it. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it, and that's, the rest is history. And here I am today. So anyway, they wanted me to give them a few tips. And, if I were in their shoes, this is what I would do, kind of talk. And that was fun to do, I thought. And one thing that struck me about this group of guys was the fact that they all were there, and that showed initiative. I don't think in fact, I was in their shoes in college, and there was this guy named Dominic that actually had the initiative to put together this group of guys. Anyway, it showed a lot of initiative, and I never had that initiative in college. I was pretty clueless, so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I think that I've kind of figured it out along the way, as you have, and you and I are somewhat, we have this trait, and I don't know how common this trait is, but this trait is that, we have a natural tendency to try to move forward in our careers. So we don't get complacent. When we're in a rut, it almost makes us uncomfortable.
Well, and we can circle back to this because, the core premise, and I'll bring because I had a similar experience recently. I was invited to come speak at my old fraternity over Zoom. So I did a Zoom meeting, and here I had 16 people that I talked to in this meeting. And it kind of got teed up as like, tell us all the things that you wish you knew when you were 22 about personal finance. And I think that the irony for me is that I think they were looking for me to tell them, like, here's how you invest your money, and here's what stocks you buy, and all of this stuff. I spent more time talking to them about the value, especially when you're young, of developing your expertise and honing your skills. And this really relates to one of the core premises of what we wanted to talk about today, is like the underappreciation in financial planning for the ability to increase your income. Right. I think what's ironic when you're 22 years old, most people at 22 years old don't have a whole lot of financial capital, like money in their bank accounts, but they have the most human capital in terms of like productive earnings years ahead of them that they'll ever have in their career. And so as much as it's tempting to try to influence the financial capital, right? Like how can I take $1,000 that I have in my bank account and buy a stock that can 10x, or buy a cryptocurrency that can 10x? Like, that's really cool. And that sounds like a lot of fun. But if you think about taking that same $1,000 and making an investment and upskilling yourself, that could have potentially exponential returns over that stock. And so the idea of increasing your income, especially when you're young, is hugely valuable. I think if you crunch the math on this, and don't quote me on the exact number, but if every $10,000 that you can increase your income by at 25 years old, if you look at somebody working to 65 and you make some assumptions about rates of return and inflation, in today's dollars, that's worth $250,000 in your pocket. So, I think getting back to financial planning principles and what you did, a lot of these people are looking for us to tell them, save your money, and all that stuff is great. But one of the things that we wanted to think about today is, how do you really focus on the things that can create the most effect on your wealth over time. And when you're young, there's just no question that you have a lot of ability to influence your wealth through growing your income.
Yeah, that's there's this popular saying right now that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's never set right with me, that statement, because I think it sets the wrong expectations. When I was the age of these kids I was talking to yesterday, and they're not kids, they're young adults, but they seem like kids to me now. But just the amount of initiative they had, I wish I had that when I was young, because I had that same mentality. It's like you got to look for a job that you love, and then you end up placing yourself on a pedestal, and you say, "Oh, that job's beneath me." I got over that real quick because of my mom. I have my mom to thank for that. She said, when I got out of college, she's basically like, "You got 6 months or the summer to get out of the house and go find your own place." She was pretty brutal about that, and I did. And then and then thus started that desperate cycle of searching for income. And had I had a little bit of initiative in college and actually tried to apply myself to really figure out what I should be doing, how do I be economically productive? And that's a stressful thing. That's a tough thing to wrap your mind around at a young age. Is like, who are you going to be? I mean, that's a lot of people don't have that figured out. That's pretty existential. Like even later on in life, they don't have it figured out. But you have to have a pretty good idea of how you're going to make ends meet. And I think one divining rod should be, as you stated, how do you not necessarily maximize your income, but put yourself in a position where your income is meaningful. And that a meaningful level of income is different for every single person. It depends on your expenses. It depends on the area you live in. It depends on your family circumstance. Are you married? Do you have any kids? That sort of thing. But one thing and we're not going to speak to like actual income amounts. I don't think that is applicable for this conversation. I think generally speaking, something that's probably, above the median level of income. You have you're at a base level of income. How do you grow from there? How do you double your income? How do you get 20% more income? How do you create the biggest shovel possible to dig yourself out of debt? Which is honestly a lot of young people. That's a problem they have. They got lots of student loan debt. They may have some credit card debt. They may have auto loan debt. Their net worth is negative. So how do you create the biggest shovel possible to maximize both your earnings potential trajectory, but also the time value of money? Because what was the stat you said earlier? It was like $200 saved today is worth X amount. And
well, for every $10,000 of earnings,
Mm-hmm.
for every $10,000 that you can increase your income by on a per year basis, essentially, if you're a 25-year-old working until you're 65, that the present value of that is somewhere around $250,000.
Yeah, it's huge. So in your mind, Brent, like what should a younger person, or even someone that's in the midst of their career and they're thinking about, okay, how do I increase my income? Maybe you're in your 40s and your 50s. What do you think they should be doing? What should they be focusing on?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that when you think about the types of ways that you can make income, you can either get paid for your time as a laborer, right? Or you can get paid for your expertise as somebody with, specific knowledge or expertise about a certain thing, right? And when you're young, it's really hard to justify getting paid for your expertise, right? I mean, expertise takes time to develop. I think most people have heard it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. And the traditional job at 40 hours a week is like 2,000 hours a year. So you think about it, the first, let's say 3 to 5 years of your career, really, you're not getting paid for your expertise at that point. You're getting paid for the fact that people need bodies. to do things, and somebody that kind of has a sense of what they're doing, right? And what's really happening in those first few years isn't that you're getting paid to, that's not, the wages aren't what's important up front, right? What's important at the beginning is thinking about the skills that you're developing so that over time you can transition from getting paid for your time to getting paid for your knowledge, right? Because if you can make that transition, you only have so many hours in the day, in the month, in the year. So when you're paid for your time, your pay is not scalable, right? And it's very linear in the sense that it takes an extra hour to produce an extra unit of work. If you can get to a place where you're paid instead of for the time that you spend, but for the value that you bring through the knowledge you have, there's really a huge potential to influence your income to the upside. And back to the point that you made before, a lot of young people, and I've seen this when I teach my college class, is that a lot of these students who are they're training to be financial planners, they love the idea of going and working at like a small boutique wealth management firm because it feels, cool and elite. But the challenge is you go work at a firm that has a couple hundred clients, and maybe a couple advisors. Like your involvement, you're going to be you're not going to be having the main parts of the conversations. You're only going to see a certain subset of client. Speaking to what I did, I took a job at Fidelity Investments when I first started, and I didn't make a whole lot of money. There's a lot of students that I talk with that feel kind of above taking phone calls, but the reality is you're having all the conversations from day one. You're leading those discussions. You're getting exposure to, thousands of people. And so you end up building up this really neat war chest of expertise that if you're able to manage your expenses along the way and transitioning this conversation a little bit into how to save and invest to put yourself in a position to increase your income, right? As you develop this knowledge and expertise, if you live within your means, if you save regularly, if you kind of do all of these things, ultimately you have options as you look to make directional changes later in your career, and you can do these things strategically with the goal, with a long-term goal of increasing your income or getting to a career that you're happy with, as opposed to short-term goals of I need a paycheck to pay next month's bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you accept your job. So your entry-level job position, it should provide the ability for you or the opportunity for you to learn or develop an expertise in the field that you want to be in, or something approximating that. So I'm thinking about my career. Like I originally started out my working life kind of as a landscaper. Now what I do right now is nothing related. So that was like wasted experience. Like I learned how to plant trees and build rock walls, and I've actually applied that in my own yard, but professionally that hasn't helped me one bit. Where it really started was I started working in the public, being a waiter. I started working at Bob Evans. So Bob Evans was my first like real job working with the public. And that's when you learn how to communicate, because really what we're in, our job is really communicating. We're communicating a very specific thing, but it's ultimately communicating. I say people are very sensitive about three things, and that's their food, their money, and their religion. You could say politics now too, but that's kind of overlapping with religion nowadays. But you dealt with some really touchy situations as a waiter. People get really angry, or they get hangry, as they say. Anyway, so I learned a skill in how to work with people and how to work around their emotions and their stress points, and that was really an important skill to develop.
Yeah, customer service.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what you end up doing for a living, but customer service teaches you so much about like conflict resolution, mm-hmm. and how to maybe kind of think about the situation from a bigger perspective than yourself. Mm-hmm. So I had a similar job. My first job, I worked at a car wash, which was actually a lot more a lot more challenging than you might think, but you had to deal with a lot of the operations of the car wash. You had to, I mean, I'm not joking. When I was 16 years old working for the car wash sent us off site for a day and gave us sales training. Okay. They took us off site and taught us how to like stand in the right place. And when the car comes up to you, you take notice of some of the things that are on the car and you talk to the person in the car. And they had a whole process to teach you how to like sell more tire shine. Yeah. For people getting their cars washed. And the company clearly sees a return on investment. And I'm not a big, like, I don't look at myself as a salesman today, but there's so much good out of some of these core skills and some of this exposure. I mean, the reality is some of those jobs when you're 16, 18, 20 years old, what's so cool about them is a lot of times they don't need to be aligned you worked at a restaurant. I worked at a car wash, and those things still add a lot of value to the careers that you have later.
They do. They give you like a base level skill, and the base level skill that I think is applicable in a lot of careers is how to deal with the public, how to navigate around,
or just how to deal with people.
Yeah. Especially people that are in stressful situations, and the restaurant environment can be a stressful situation. It really can be. At least to me, it was. So I learned a lot of skills there. But at the time, I had no idea what I wanted to do. There was no career vision that I had. That developed later on. And so the important thing is that I think the earlier that you develop that career vision, the better it is for you. And that's difficult to do. And your point was really accept the fact that you're getting paid just for your time in the seat.
It takes time to develop that expertise. So to your point, the sooner you can identify it and start to, start moving your actions in a direction where you're doing stuff that's related to what you're interested in, the sooner you're starting to work through building, that 10,000 hours.
Yeah. Here's an example. So let's say, I was a waiter and I was learning how to deal in the public. All right. But let's say I didn't figure out that I wanted to be in finance. And I was clueless all the way till maybe age 35. Maybe I would have gone and taken a job as a desk jockey somewhere. And I would have spent the next 5 years or 10 years of my life learning about a skill that would have no application to my final career. So you could potentially waste decades by not having some form of
and I will
direction.
tell you, one of the neat things about working at Fidelity was that you really did talk to, I think I talked to 30,000 some odd people while I was there. And so you really get a sense for like what makes people wealthy versus not. And I will say that one of the most common traits that was shared by people that didn't ever build kind of meaningful wealth was that they did a lot of job changing. And when I say job changing, I don't mean like, they went from one company to the competitor company. I mean, like they had one career and then 10 years later, it kind of didn't work out. So then they decided to change directions completely. Like you have to give yourself time to look there's no substitute for spending the time doing something to be able to look back. And when somebody asks you a question about it, you will be able to feel when you have a level of expertise that you're answering that question through knowledge and expertise as opposed to what you learned in class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that the earlier you define your career path, the better. Now, what I struggle with is, okay, well, how do people figure out who they want to be when they grow up? And by the way, that's not like meant to be targeted just to young people. I know a lot of older folks that still don't know what they want to be because it's a very tough thing to answer. And that's what, back to that comment, like just do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life comment. That's just, it's like fingers on a chalkboard to me, because it basically sets the expectation incorrectly that your career should be leisure. You should always love it. I mean, that is such bull crap. Case in point, like all kids want to be YouTube stars these days or TikTok stars or influencers because my kids watch this guy they call Unspeakable. That's his YouTube name is Unspeakable. I think his actual name is James or something. I forget. Doesn't matter. The guy he just records himself just goofing off with his buddies, and they're just doing crazy things. They're having like Nerf gun wars, and they're riding jet skis in this little pond. They're doing all sorts of crazy things. Looks like they're having a blast. All right, and that's what the kids see. They see all this fun. And they go, oh, I want to do that. That's what I want to be. And this guy's able to buy, Lamborghinis and things like that. But what they don't see is that this guy's probably working till 3 a.m. editing these videos.
Yeah.
And putting that content out there and doing the hard work to publish it. There's elements of his job that he probably thinks are absolute misery. One of the good episodes I listened to was Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is like the most popular YouTube. You got to listen to his interview with Lex Friedman on Lex Friedman's podcast. The guy is a workhorse.
Oh, he is
not. So he is not just leisurely videotaping himself and putting it out there. So my point is that even these guys who have these perceived glorious, amazing jobs, that there's parts of their careers that they probably hate, and it's not all leisure. And for you to think like, well, I'm going to be economically productive by doing things that I absolutely love doing. Okay, well, let's name a few things. Yeah, everybody loves watching Netflix. Everybody loves going to restaurants and eating. Everybody loves travel. Everybody loves going to baseball games. How you gonna make money doing that?
Well, and it's important, there's kind of this intersection of you have to think about things that you enjoy doing, and then you have to find a way to make it economically viable.
I don't even think you need to enjoy doing it. I don't think that. I think that you learn to enjoy things that you're good at. So, I can give you two examples. One is my son, Luke. He decided he wanted to play baseball because we tell our kids, you got to pick a sport, because this is how you're going to learn to do a hard thing and you're going to get good at it. And it's going to be hard work, but eventually you learn to enjoy it, because this is the concept we're trying to. He started out with baseball, not being that great, because no one starts out naturally good at anything, really. I mean, there are some people that kind of take to things quicker than others, but go to any like 5-year-old league, none of them are batting like Joey Votto, So it was hard for him, but he, after several practices and he's getting the hang of it, he says, Dad, I really enjoy this. This is fun. And I thought, now you're learning something. You're learning that, challenging things that you previously didn't enjoy because they were slightly outside of your comfort zone. Now you're finding yourself enjoying them because you're getting competent. Your competency is growing, and you're learning to grow in confidence in those things. And that is a reward process that can be applicable to anything. The next example I'll give you is my own self. So, I got into this career, as I stated earlier, accidentally, because I needed a job. Honestly, that's why I'm in financial advice today, is because at one point when I was, I think, 22 years old, my mom was going to kick me out of the house, and it was right before the financial crisis. I needed a job. So I saw this guy doing this. I thought, I can do that. But I absolutely hated this career. I hated it. So much so that I tried to get out of it 4 separate times. 3 times trying to get into the Air Force. 1 time trying to become a network engineer. And every single time I tried to deviate, you could call it, divine intervention or what have you. I don't know, but I got clawed back into the career. And ultimately I find myself here today, and I'm happier than I ever thought I would be. And I'm doing something that I previously, just a decade ago, absolutely hated. I hated it. I thought it was boring. I thought, it's too salesy. I'm coming across as money hungry. I'm really not providing a value to people, but I absolutely love it now, because you know what? I am very good at it. And, I learned that once you get good at something, once you develop that expertise, that deep level of knowledge, and you set yourself apart from other people, from the crowd, you become like, part of like the 5% group, the 5% of the population that's really good at this one thing, then you learn to love what you're doing. And I think you can apply that to virtually any career.
So, well, that, I think that's interesting. I one time I read Andre Agassi's book, and it was so interesting because he all throughout that book, he talks about how much he hated tennis along the way, but he was really good at it. And I just recently watched the U.S. Open, and there's Andre Agassi presenting the awards and stuff. So he is a huge part of that sport. But I had a very different experience. I actually have a science background. I technically have a chemistry degree from college, and my hobby in college, which was saving some of the side cash that I had and investing, essentially went from something that I found interesting in a hobby to, I guess my thought process when I did my CFP was, well, the worst case here is that I know how to handle money better, and I decide that I don't really like this. And to me, there was only so much downside in that. You could go do another career, but know how to handle your personal finances more effectively. And so I did the CFP, and I found out that I really like this. And so it's a slight, like I have a very different experience, but now kind of back to the core conversation we were having of how to raise your income. We talk about, okay, so you get into your job, you develop your expertise. Like, what do you do along the way to put yourself in a position to be able to grow your income? And you mentioned, I think you were trying to give me some credit for just constantly wanting to advance. I have this belief that in your career or in your life that like you are going to have certain moments that you aren't in control of when they get presented to you, but your job in terms of your preparation along the way is to be ready to recognize and buckle down and really execute in those key moments where life throws those really big challenges at you. And so I almost go a slightly like, I don't think you always need to be advancing. I think in some ways, if you are just going all the time, you can wear yourself out. I think it's really important to be smart and to be thoughtful as far as, okay, while you're developing the expertise, thinking about the dollars of it, you want to save money, live within your means, diversify your investments, like build up a war chest in terms of knowledge and expertise, but also side cash. How are you going to make sure that you have money so that as life throws these hard things at you, whether they be personal or career, you can start to make decisions in those moments, not given the immediacy in the short term of everything, but starting to think about, okay, as somebody that now has some expertise, understands your industry, understands this challenge that's facing you. I mean, there's a lot that having some extra money in the bank can do to allow you to make a strategic decision that might be harder in the short term of your career, but better for you in the long term of your career. And so to me, whether you're just out of college or you're a career changer, you really have to focus this first 10,000 hours, let's say, of developing your expertise. It's really important to position yourself to be able to execute effectively, not if, but when the issues come your way. Yeah.
I think that once you develop that expertise, that's criteria number one, is like figure out your career path, become an expert in it, and then build up a war chest of cash on the side, because there's two ways that I see that can become an asset to you. Way number one, which is the way I took, is you start your own business, which on day one of your business, you have absolutely zero customers. So you need to have income. You need to have something to live off of. So you can have a spouse or, legacy money that you can live off of. Most people, though, they have to live off of their own savings. So it gives you a buffer to build that business. So that's way number one. Way number two, it benefits you is, and this is probably what most people find. Most people are employees, not business owners. I encourage you to pursue entrepreneurship, because that is by far the best investment in yourself. in terms of return on investment, so long as you're competent at execution.
Yeah, as long as it works.
Yeah. It can also be
which
the most
is a big
destructive.
asterisk, right? Yeah. I mean, it just back to developing the expertise.
But not everybody has the acumen to start their own business. They don't want it, and I get that.
Or their field is just. I mean, some fields are a higher barrier of entry.
Correct. So you're an employee, and that's how most folks are. So what is having a large savings account give you? Well, it changes your attitude when you go in and you negotiate raises, because that's another thing about increasing your income that people discount. I had a conversation with a client yesterday about this very thing, and this person was frustrated that their loyalty was not being rewarded. They were with this employer for 25 plus years, yet new hires were making more money. And I told this person, not trying to give away gender or who this person is, but I told this person, you need to go out in the marketplace and find out what your worth is. In other words, go search for a new job. Go search for now. This is not to suggest like you need to take this job, but you need to find out what your skills are worth in the marketplace. Furthermore, you need to have a cushion. You need that back to that savings account. You need to be able to go into that discussion with your manager or whoever is responsible for giving you a raise. And you just need to state the facts. Just say, I have options.
Right.
What are you going to do? Well, actually, I do think if we're going to talk about how to ask for a raise, I think that how to ask for a raise starts a year prior in your prior review. You need to be very specific on your hire day or your last review and state to that boss, my goal income is X. Please tell me, how do I get there?
Well, sure.
And then let this person tell you how you get there. And then you achieve that. And then you have that justification. Say, here, I've hit these metrics. Let's talk about my compensation.
But I know, for the people listening to this, mm-hmm. When you're in a place at work where it doesn't feel good and you don't have options, right? True. And there is an anxiety mm-hmm. that comes along with that, where you feel you have zero leverage and you are essentially forced, to just deal with whatever comes up. And so to your point, like I've dealt with this with clients, and I ask them, what leverage do you have? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that question gets kind of misinterpreted, but what it really means is like, okay, leverage could look like I've got other places I could go work. Leverage could look like I've got money in the bank to deal with, trying to manage through a situation. But the fact is, putting yourself in a spot where somebody else is in control of your situation and you don't have options is really disadvantageous. Oh yeah, for your ability to control and own your own outcomes. You do not want
to go into a compensation discussion in a desperate state, right? Because that will come through. Your voice will be strained. Your argument will be emotionally based.
Well, and you just have no leverage. What if they say no? What do you say?
There's nothing you can't say.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate you hearing me out. It's, and I have friends and clients that I've watched. Some of my most financially competent friends will, and, this is maybe to an extreme, but they'll actually go out and regularly get job offers from competitors, take them back to their bosses, say, hey, I need you to do something to get closer to this offer. And then, by the way, now they just got an off-cycle raise. Mm-hmm. And now when annual raises come up and they get a 3% raise or whatever it is, it's now 3% of a bigger number, which is a bigger number. And my friends that are, the people that I work with and I know that have done this, when you actually look, the days are long and the years are short, right? And so it doesn't feel like it adds up in a really short-term basis. But when you go look at their income growth over 5 and 10 years, all of a sudden they're making a chunk of money. And, if you've managed to, along the way, again, keep your expenses manageable relative to that income, now, they've got expertise. They've got higher income that they've been able to raise. Like they're in a really strong position and a lot of these people are in their mid 30s or early 40s. Now you're in a really strong position to go and search for that next job or really seek that high level position and be an executive or whatever it is that you want to achieve.
So, that's tough for a lot of people. I imagine there's some folks listening that might say, or they might not say this or admit this themselves, but deep in their psyche, they may be afraid to go out and shop for jobs because they might think to themselves, well, what if my employer finds out? Yeah. Well, what if my employer finds out? That's one fear, although I don't think that is a legitimate fear. Because there's nothing preventing your employer cannot terminate you because they found out you're searching for a job. They really, and if they do, you're not with the right employer, and you shouldn't be worried about that anyway. But anyway, I think most people are actually afraid to find out that they're not worth as much as they thought, or that maybe I'm getting overpaid. They're afraid that they're afraid to find out the truth. And as the saying goes, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. It applies here too. The irony of this is that the fact that you are afraid to go out and find out your net worth probably means that you are overpaid right now, because the act of going out and finding out your self-worth it proves that you have a lot of initiative. It sets you apart from your coworkers and the rest of the folks. So you having that initiative is not just applicable in your own personal drive for higher income. It's applicable to the business bottom line too, because that drive as a manager, like I hire people work for me. And if I see someone going out and constantly finding it, now there is a limit to this. Like if they're searching for jobs on the employer's dime, then that there's some problems there. So you gotta do this on your own time, I think.
What a lot of people don't do is they take it so, like, you would think that going out and having lunch with somebody that works at a different competitor or somebody that could potentially hire you is like a super serious thing. Like, oh, if I have lunch with somebody that I'm looking for a job, there's something to be said for just getting to know people in your industry and learning from the pathways of others. So one of the things that I think you can do to, develop these relationships and hone this expertise and be, take initiative is just go out and set meetings, like with people that you think are doing something interesting, right? I mean, the irony is, and back to your point of just having initiative, the irony is that it's so easy today to reach. I mean, if you go on LinkedIn and you XYZ name a person that you think is doing something interesting, you can hit message and you can spend 10 seconds typing them a message. Hey, such and so, I am so and so. I really think what you're doing is cool. I would love to spend some time picking your brain. Like, would you be willing to set aside some time with me? The worst thing they can do is not say yes. But, one of the common themes that I see with people that are trying to advance in their career is they're reactive, right? Like they're not going and setting those meetings until there's a need to get a job. And the reality is, like, you shouldn't be doing that just out of need. You want to be, if you want to see your career as a bigger thing than your job, right? And I think that can be hard. Like if I am a financial planner, like when I worked at Fidelity, I didn't define myself by my job at Fidelity. I defined my career as a financial planner, and Fidelity was just the job that I had that was kind of building on that career. And through that, you can go and meet other people that are doing other things and just get exposure to the broader industry. The reality is that's the way that you get a job. Nobody, you sit down with somebody that you've never met at a lunch and you say, hey, I don't have a job. Can you give me a job? They're not, the likelihood that that's going to come through versus somebody that you may have had developed a relationship with over years is really low.
Yeah. And it also subjects yourself to the timing issue. I don't know what you would call this, but the odds of you being out of a job and that person just having a job opening at the same exact time are pretty low. So you have to build your network while you're established. And the earlier you build your network, the better, obviously. But you got to also nurture your network.
But how many times have you heard, well, why would I do that? I'm not looking for another job. And it's like, well, that's not the point.
I know it isn't the point. You want to build these connections, but also nurture them. You don't want to just go out to lunch with one person one time and then you just never communicate with them again. You do need to every once in a while reach out.
Figure out the right ones, but like that just doesn't happen on its own. You have to, meet with different people and figure out who you get along with and who you want to follow, who you want to learn from.
And the right tact for this, I think, is to do it authentically. So I like to meet people in this industry, not because I want something out of them other than just their knowledge and experience. Like I want to learn. It's amazing. People are amazing because if you approach every conversation, like, what does this person know that I don't, what can they teach me? Then it'll be amazing how much you figure out that you don't know. First of all, how great people are and how deep their knowledge can be. And then also it gives you all the reason you need to connect with people on an authentic level. So you're not trying to reach out to them and say, okay, how can I get money out of your pocket into my pocket? That's not the basis of these relationships. The basis of these relationships is how can I learn more from you and what can I share with you? How can I help you? And I think if you develop your network with that mindset, then it will serve you very well.
And one of the best pieces of career advice I ever got was that you never want to run away from a job. You always want to run to or towards a job, right? And I think you have to proactively put yourself in a position to do that because it's really easy to go through a tough period of time at work and go, gosh, I really want to leave. And you get all motivated and you're going to start looking for jobs. And then things get a little bit better and you get comfortable again and you forget about it. Right. But the reality is if you're going to change employers and increase your income and do it from a position of strength, it's not going to be reactive. The likelihood that you get pissed off at work one day and the next day you come in and quit and you're going to go find a better job with higher income, like that's a lot harder to do than over a period of months or years, investing yourself and your time into your industry, figure out what your value is, what the different roles are, how people play a role in the different aspects of your industry. And then the process of doing that on its own should reveal certain pathways. And you may actually find yourself, instead of leaving your job because you don't like it or something goes on, you might actually find yourself with a potential job that you find really opportunistic, right? Maybe that comes along with immediate financial benefit in terms of salary and stuff. Maybe you have to take a little bit of a jump and it's something that, hey, long-term, this is a really great idea, but short-term, it's going to be a little dicey. And back to, building up your expertise, investing your time in your industry, saving your money along the way so that you have, again, when the situation presents itself, and quit trying to control the situation. If you do the right inputs, the outputs will show up, right? So quit trying to control the outputs and focus more on the inputs. And the reality is, you and I both know it as we talk to people, it's really easy to say, yeah, go do how many people actually take the initiative to get up and send a DM on LinkedIn or make a phone call or whatever it is and set up a lunch with some random person or somebody that they know through somebody. It's just, it's easy to do, but it doesn't mean people do it a lot. And that should be something that makes you optimistic in the sense that being more, engaged, the bar is not as high as you might think.
Where do you think the failure is? I personally think the issue is people generally have they find it's the old, how do you eat an elephant problem? They take this large goal, like the goal is increase your income. And you can even be more specific, you say double my income. I mean, that's such a massive goal. How do you approach that? It really is challenging. And I think that the goal kind of seems so intimidating that you just stop there and you're like, I can't be done. It can't be done. I'm just going to stay here in my rut and we're just going to go down here. I find that when it comes to big, large goals like that, you have to start small. Like this podcast. This podcast was intimidating to start. I thought about it for a couple of years, actually. I'm like, I got to do that. I got to do that. It's a big time commitment and everything. It just, and in the technology piece, like how do you put it all together? How do you distribute it? How do you edit it? All this stuff. And what you do is you just say, okay, well, I'm going to start with this one thing. And I think when it comes to job searching, here's what you do. You time block. You just say this hour on this Saturday or Sunday or whatever time you have, you're not working this hour. Instead, you're not hunting for a new job. You're not trying to increase your pay. You're just going to send out 3 or 4 emails or connections. You're going to look for, maybe just narrow it down to one. You're just looking for one connection that could have a smallest of possibility of increasing your chances of success in the future. If you just do this one thing and you do it every Sunday on this hour, then what you'll find is that larger goal that you have, it's going to come an inch closer. And you start taking these little tiny steps. I think generally people struggle with that, breaking down large goals into smaller, achievable goals, because it's so intimidating. The other thing I mentioned earlier, which was I think people are kind of afraid of the truth in a lot of ways. It's why a lot of guys, and it's mostly guys, we all know it, avoid doctors' appointments because we don't want to know the truth, So there's an element of that going on too. It's an element of fear, which that's a harder thing to overcome. And if that's what's keeping you from having this discussion with your employer about increasing your pay or going out and hunting for a new job, I don't know what to say. I mean, you're going to have to overcome that fear. Maybe get a good therapist can help with that.
The reality is, and we've all dealt with clients in this situation where the finances aren't working, and there's only one of 2 ways to fix that problem.
Yep. You
can either drop expenses or raise income.
And there's a limit to how much you can drop in expenses.
I know that the people listening to this podcast may or may not provide financial advice, but good luck telling a family of 4 or 5, to cut their expenses by 30%. I mean, raising a family is expensive, and it's never been more expensive than it is today. The clients that we work with, that are in their early family formation years where they have young children, or, the way that they've gotten pinched over the last 5 years between the cost of housing going up, inflation that's happened in the economy, and having kids at the same time. I mean, the irony of financial planners out there saying you millennials are just buying too much avocado toast. This isn't a problem that's going to solve by $5 of cuts to a budget, right? Over time, you need to be saving 15% or so of your income towards retirement, starting in your 30s to really be able to effectively retire, and families get pinched. So the reality is, if you don't solve your own problem, whether that's by increasing your income or reducing your expenses, forces of economics will eventually solve them for you. And it won't be in a way where you feel in control. Right. And so the reality is, burying your head in the sand is easy to do. But it oftentimes the consequences long-term can be big. And, back to the point, dropping expenses can only go so far. Income can increase, in theory, unlimited. I mean, I'm sure some people roll their eyes when they hear that, but income, it is easier to increase your income by a few $1,000s a month, oftentimes, with a family, than drop your expenses by thousands of dollars a month.
You think,
people get used to spending the money. Once you start spending the money, you get spoiled. I mean, it is so, this goes back to, and I know we probably should wrap up here, but this goes back to something we talked about earlier, growing your expenses slower than you grow your income. It is so much easier to increase your standard of living slowly than to go from a higher standard of living and drop it down. Right. If you're always getting to, nicer stuff that, it is so hard once you have eaten Kerrygold butter to go back to the regular butter. And, when Costco only puts it on sale a couple of times a year and it still is expensive. So that's an anecdote for like, once you start spending on the nicer stuff, it becomes a lot harder to bring that back in. In reality, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'll just do it now. And then it's easy to say, but the reality is people get used to standards of living and it's really hard to drop a standard of living. It's much easier to increase standard of living slowly versus dropping it.
I 100% agree. The only thing I think most people, when they hear about saving, like when you talk to, I don't know if this is true, but I would say most people, if you pull them off the street and you say, you need to save 20% of your income starting today, how are you going to do that? Most people in their mind, they're thinking, how do I cut my expenses? That's what they default to. They default to like, okay, what do I cut out of my budget? Do I get rid of my car? Do I get rid of, it's like, no, what you're saying is that you need to think, how do I increase my income?
Well, what I'm saying is, if you're to the point where you're saving zero and you need to save 20%, what you might want to think about doing, sure, it doesn't hurt to cut it. I'm not saying it's bad to cut expenses. It's just, it's not a pleasant experience. So what I'm postulating is that, hey, as your income grows in the future, if you're not saving anything, maybe when your income grows, which by the way, you should be trying to actively influence, don't increase your spending at the same rate. The problem with
that, Brent, is like most people, if you're just complacent and you are just expecting your employer to give you raises, your income is only going to increase at barely the rate of inflation.
No, agreed. But
therefore you're never going to reach an escape velocity, because if you're spending 100% of your income and you're getting 3 to 6% raises and inflation's running 3 to 6%, then in 5-10 years from now, you're going to be spending 100% of your income. So you need to take the initiative and figure out, how do you meaningfully increase your income? And we've already discussed
meaningfully increasing your expenses along the way.
And you need to hone your expertise. You need to build if you don't have a war chest of assets to live off of, should you go into the job negotiation and then it not work out in your favor, you need at least to have an alternate job offer. Just have your options.
Have options.
Have options before you go into that negotiation. But you need to communicate with your employer about your pay. You can't just expect your employer to automatically reward you for your loyalty. That does not happen.
Right. You are your own.
And by the way, it's never happened. There's this idea like, oh, there used to be a time in America where, or the world, where loyalty was rewarded. No. That's never happened. So I will tell you, most employers, and it's not because they're bad. A lot of folks think, oh, my employer he's just a selfish jerk and they don't care about me. They don't care about my well-being. It's not that they don't care. It's they don't think about it.
Well, you agreed to the pay.
Yeah.
As far as they're concerned, they've got a document that you signed that says, I'm happy with this pay raise and you're going to give me pay raise. So you can't expect them to read your mind.
Yes.
And understand that you're unhappy.
You need to communicate it.
And that's in everybody's interest, because if you're a valuable employee, the employer doesn't want to lose you either. Right. And so, it is important to have, you don't want to have so much transparency that, you tell your boss, I'm going to go out and shop for jobs. but like, it is important to communicate. Being passive aggressive, whether it's a marriage or, a corporate engagement, is not.
I don't think you don't want to say, I'm going to go shop for jobs, not because your employer knows that already.
You don't want to threaten.
Yeah. It's perceived as a threat.
Right.
And that is you never start a successful negotiation with a threat.
Threatening. Right.
So you just need to be, I say, let honesty rule the day. If you're unsatisfied with your compensation and you feel like your level of expertise deserves a higher compensation commensurate with your expertise, then you need to go in and just tell your employer, I am dissatisfied right now, and this is why. And you need to have a legitimate reason. You can't just say,
like you said before, come in a year ahead of time and say, look, I have aspirations and goals, and let me talk to you about those so that we can put ourselves in a position to have a successful employee-employer relationship over time.
So, I think that's the last thing that we'll discuss today. So essentially to grow your income successfully, as we've seen, you need to have some initiative. For initially, that initiative needs to be developing expertise in a field that maybe it's not something that you love, but it's something that you are engaged in and you somewhat enjoy. I don't suggest people go out and be trash collectors if they absolutely despise it and they're going to hate every waking moment of their life. I don't think that is necessarily what I should say, but I also don't think you need to have a passion around what you do and you need to love every moment of your work. It's like there's no job out there that's like that. In fact, in my example, I hated pretty much every moment of my job initially, but I love it now. So, but initially you need to have the initiative to develop an expertise. You need to have a vision of what your career path looks like.
Well, or at least be working towards, trying to learn the things to help you shape that vision.
Yes. You need to have a savings habit. So we always suggest save 15% of what you make.
And automatic savings is really important. I mean, everybody that we talk to, they put the money in their checking account, and at the end of the month, if there's some left over, put it in savings.
That doesn't work.
Learn to go to your paycheck, your direct deposit system, set it up to go into multiple accounts, get the money out of your check.
Yeah.
Savings is a habit. Out of mind. And by the way, that's not because the savings that you're doing is necessarily going to, but it's because it's good behavior management and you want to set yourself up again to be able to make, to be able to be flexible and have options when you get to whatever step 3, I guess you're about to say.
Step 3 is be willing to find out the truth of what you are worth in the marketplace. Because, I know if you're scared to find out or you're scared you're going to get fired or something like that, none of this stuff matters. Build out your network, find out what you're truly worth, because it's going to tell you a couple things. One is it's going to tell you if you are worth as much as you think you are, because if the truth may be that you're worth less than what you think you are, and that should tell you either you need to develop more expertise or you need to shift careers. Maybe your career just is not as lucrative as you thought. The other thing it's going to do, and this is most likely the result, is going to tell you actually what you're worth in the marketplace. So now you have a negotiation.
Which oftentimes, by the way, I mean, I know you got negative, Ben being negative.
Most of the time.
Oftentimes it's more.
Yes, most of the time you find out you're worth more in the marketplace. So I'm not negative. I'm just realistic. That's what I tell my wife. Anyway, most of the time you're right. Like 95% of the time, it's you find out a pleasant truth, which is that
presumably if you're getting the offer, they want to entice you to come away from your employer.
Absolutely. And then you can take that offer. It doesn't mean you're going to accept it. You can take that offer because a lot of people get anxiety about like switching jobs. It's like moving. It's like, oh my God, I don't want to switch jobs. It's like, well, no, but you take that offer and then you use it as a point of negotiation. And you demonstrate to your employer, this is what I'm worth. Why am I not worth it to you?
Right.
Like, and then the employer is going to say, oh my gosh, you are worth it to me. And then they're probably going to increase your pay, and voila. So anyway, that was the last step. I think with those instructions, which they sound very simple, but they're very difficult to apply.
Simple, but not easy.
Yes, right? Simple, but not easy. And that is why we are here and why we hope you continue to listen, because this is a nudge in that direction. We want you to improve your life. We want you to make more money, and we want you to create more meaning in your environment, create more meaning to your with your family, which often costs money. And then also in your career, because your career, the better you get at something, the more competent you are, the more purpose you find in that. So, that said, if you want to learn more about, Brent and I, all our links are in the show notes. So take a look at that. But Brent, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, we really enjoy sharing on some of this stuff. We do this because although Ben, likes to say that he used to hate his career, he loves it now.
I do.
And I love it. And so we really enjoy.
And that shift happened probably about a decade ago.
Well,
so, I spent
But it's not important. The point is, we do this because we're having fun, and we hope that you're getting something from it. You know, if you have any questions for us, please reach out. Whether you want us to talk about something on the podcast, we're always looking for material to kind of prompt some of our thoughts going, and or you just have questions about something that you've got going on. So we appreciate you listening, and we look forward to sharing with you in the future.
Yep. Catch you later. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services offered through National Wealth Management Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from LPL Financial, LLC. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. This information is not intended as authoritative guidance or tax or legal advice. You should consult with your attorney or tax advisor for guidance on your specific situation. Brent Gargano is not affiliated with LPL Financial.